To wrap up our Guardian series, we're going to be covering the Elemental Guardians. So to kick us off today, we have Oldhim. Oldhim is a Elemental Guardian, but has access to both Earth and Ice in its essence. So you can play Earth and Ice cards in this deck. Has a once per turn defense reaction where you can pay 3 if an Earth card is pitched this way, prevent the next 2 damage that you would be dealt. And if an Ice card is pitched this way, the attacking hero has to put a card from their hand on top of their deck. The Ice React is mainly what we're playing this hero for. We have some blue Earth cards that you can pitch. So we have cards like Sotomara, which would block 2 anyway. And so splitting the prevention is a little bit more efficient. Really, this is here for the Ice React. The Ice React into aggro decks just means that they are normally having to put an entire card, normally worth about 4 damage on top of their deck. These are aggro decks in this format that scale damage very well. Think about things like Fire, Briar. So them having to put entire cards on top of their deck sometimes means that they can't arsenal a power card. So if they were to say, let's say, end the turn and they're sending attack without go again, they have a card in hand, you get Ice React, and then they don't get to sculpt an arsenal. They're just playing again with 4 cards off the top of the deck. Or in the middle of their turn, you're able to manage a lot more defensive capabilities by making them basically put, like most of the time, like something like a Rabble or a Scar, a Snatch, whatever, back on top of their deck. Pitching like a block 2 ice card to the hero text is usually very powerful. The rest of the deck is mainly just trying to play some disruption when we're given the space to do so. So we have cards like Boulder Drop and Choke Slam, Fault Line. These are just disruptive cards. But because that Oldhim has so much disruption built into the hero text, it means that instead of having to fill out the deck with a bunch of these crush cards like we have in the previous Guardian list, we can just play some better raw stat numbers. So we have cards like Red Glacial that come in for 10 with 3 cards. So what's very crazy about this format only having 20 health is that if you send 2 red glacials at your opponent, that is lethal. You have that disruptive capability. You can just kind of play some better raw numbers. This is helpful for some of the slower matchups. And then we also have anti-aggro, good blocking cards. So you have cards like Testamite and Crash and Bash, just good generic 4 blocks to have. But the rest of the deck is mainly just utility blues. We're running a Blossom of Spring because of the fact that we have these 1-drops like Polar Blast, Cold Snap, and Sotomara that can be played from your arsenal to draw a whole card. So you can pop the Blossom and play these, draw a new card, and play with the rest of your hand basically. So I thought that it would kind of smooth that out a little bit. Using it for Pummel is possible, but it's a little bit harder because of losing the old knocker. It's a lot more telegraphed now. And we don't have any 2 costs at the moment because I was originally playing Frostfang, but ended up cutting the cards. So we are currently not on a curve to play Pummel. I might actually end up cutting the Pummel maybe to play Frostfang itself. So that's definitely a card in my maybe board. Our sideboard is Crush the Weak against Phi, Staunch against Mirror and Azalea, and Arctic against any of the aggro decks, but also mainly against Briar. It's usually a Time Walk, and then we have AB3. Overall, this deck is trying to play mid-range, but usually pitching a card every single turn to Oldhim's hero ability, and then usually descending back Titan's Fist on his turn. Or if you are given the space for the 2-card hands, you send your 2-card hands like Fault Line or Boulder Drop, or you can pop Blossom and send Choke Slam on a 2-card hand. And then when you're given the space, like the tempo, because your opponent has to block out your crush effect, and so they block you out, and then they say like, well, you're a Guardian deck, you're not aggro, so I'll just block, conserve my life, arsenal card, and pass. That's when you can get to resolve cards like Red Glacial or Red Thunderquake and basically chunk like their health total over the course of a couple turns. And then when you're attacking them and forcing them to block, like especially into an aggro deck where they have all these 2 blocks, you kind of just deterministically win the game. They can never keep enough cards to actually pressure your life total. And then you're sending enough damage that they're just burning a bunch of cards from their hand to block. So eventually at some point they fatigue out. So you can play on a couple different axes with this deck. So here we have a game in a Briar. We draw Macho on the opener. So basically anytime you open with this card, you probably should descend it. It just leaks so much free damage on turn 0. So we're going to have leaking 5 on turn 0. Very good for us. We don't really have any good actual arsenal hits. This next hand's very good. We can block with the Testamite, Ice React, and then send the Boulder Drop if we want to. We can also block with these 3 cards, including the Ice React, and then just sending Hammer, although I think I'm probably more inclined to send the Boulder Drop. So this is tricky because they could end up having a very good chain closer, in which case I want to hold on to the Testamite. However, if they just arsenal and pass here, it ends up being pretty rough for us. Yeah, so they end up actually going to sidestep this. I guess we'll go ahead and still Oldhim React, but we end up taking 4 damage for no reason. So I was literally talking through the play line of why I might just want to stick the Testamite in front of this, and then immediately I get punished for taking the opposite line. So you definitely can consider that, where it's like if they were to just kind of do nothing and pass, you just don't want to get caught with the Testamite because these D reacts are banned in this format for some reason. Like we have to consider the fact that you literally have to IP this. So we ended up kind of missing 4 value here, plus the potential might token, which actually would be pretty relevant here. If this thing came in for 8, they would have to give more than just 1 non-attack. But if they have like a 3-block non-attack, like Burn Up or Arcane Seeds, they can just stick this in front and stop the crush and still hold on to all their equipment. We want them to have to burn their equipment just to sidestep some of the on-hits, but it looks like that wasn't the case, so we end up getting a little bit lucky here. They get to still block the Sizzle though, so they still get their embodiment value. We're gonna have to hold on to the Testamite and just not Arsenal, unfortunately. I guess it would have been a brick on the top, so they're gonna play Burn Up Shock, but they only have 2 extra cards to do this. I guess they're gonna get the Reaping Blade, but this is not very good, to be honest. They are gonna have their embodiment, but none of this is actually pushing this through for an on-hit. So this is only going to come in for 7, actually. So we're just going to go ahead and we are going to just block for 7. We end up making the Might token, showing a Glacial. They're probably going to pop the Garland to send the Reaping Blade, in which case we're just going to go ahead and just block with the Thunderquake. End up not choosing to use it. I guess probably just wanted to hold it for the final Burn Up Shock turn, since they still have 1 left in deck. We're going to go ahead and send Fist for 4 and just Arsenal the Thunderquake. The cool part is that, if my opponent takes this, and if we just send a Thunderquake, we are presenting lethal. So this deck can catch up damage pretty quickly. We still have our full fridge up, including, the extra 3 life that pretty much no one else in the game gets. Getting these offhand shields, I think, is really broken in this format. So it's why I think that Guardian, I think if you're not going to play an aggro deck, probably has the best time in this format as a disruptive control deck, because you just, and all these decks, you just get 3 extra life, which is a big deal. This hand is almost good, but doesn't really quite do much. We really want them to Arsenal. So they're going to go ahead and play Snatch with Go again. We're going to go ahead and block with the Crash and Bash. We're not going to reveal anything because I don't want to show this in my hand. I want my opponent to feel like they're safe to Arsenal. And they're going to play Arcana Crackle. Does not have Go again, which is very good for us because now we can just block with this Glacial, and then we get to send the Fault Line. And the Fault Line actually comes in for 8 because we put the Thunderquake in our own arsenal. It'll suck if we end up losing it, but I definitely think that us losing our arsenal is less impactful than my opponent. All of our hands are just kind of mid-range good number stuff. My opponent's hands kind of scale, if that makes sense. 5 cards from a Briar is worth more at in terms of total damage than us. We have these diminishing returns on our cards. If our opponent just passed and we had to do a full turn with these 5 cards, we would just end up being incredibly inefficient. My opponent just plays all 0 for 4s, and some of them scale really well. If this is Burn Up Shock, then my opponent playing a 2-card Burn Up Shock hand doesn't do anything compared to them, having to play a 5-card Burn Up Shock hand. So this kind of stuff is important. So you always kind of prioritize putting the Briar down on cards. It's more beneficial for you. And so even if we lose our arsenal, it's not the biggest deal because I think that our arsenal is worth less than the Briars. So my opponent's going to send Rabble. They show Lightning Press on top of the deck. That's not good for us to know, unfortunately. We're going to go ahead and just block for 6 probably here, although I might as well put the Gauntlet in front because this gives us the ability to cleanly block for 3 on a future Reaping Blade. My opponent plays Read the Runes and passes. We're going to go ahead and send Boulder Drop. It requires 2 cards. My opponent is out of blocking armor, so they can't just put 1 3-block in front. They're going to have to give us 2 cards here just to stop the on-hit. They also have to give us at least 1 card here to stop them from dying. So I think overall we're kind of putting them in a good spot. We still have most of our equipment up, which is really good. The main problem here though is we know about the Lightning Press, so we have to kind of play around that. So I'm going to block for 5 with a Flourish and a Jack Be Nimble. That's good for us because my opponent's taking damage. They're going down to 3, and now we have a pretty good control of this game. We have a couple different options here. We can break the Blossom to go ahead and play the Choke Slam. We're going to go ahead and start by taking this damage. We know about the Lightning Press in my opponent's hand. So we're gonna have to kind of block accordingly. So I'm kind of leaning more towards actually using the Choke Slam as a blocking card here. And then when my opponent overextends, we're gonna go ahead and just pitch the Polar Blast. We're gonna go ahead and block like this. My opponent does not Lightning Press this. I mean, we're still gonna go ahead and take this line. We're gonna Ice React them here. It kind of prices them into having to use the Lightning Press on this attack. And then if they do use the Lightning Press, we'll just go ahead and just play the Arctic and then regain the 2 life off of the fruits. So we're kind of holding the fruits in hand to kind of do whatever. If my opponent puts a Lightning Press on top and sends an attack like Snatch or something like that, we can block with the fruits and the Buckler and then still play the Arctic. But the nice thing here is that we're able to kind of use this in either direction here. So my opponent's going to go ahead and send the Reaping Blade now. So we kind of have to just cash this in. We're going to lose the future 1 block on the Helm, but my opponent probably is not going to send a Reaping Blade again this game. So it's just the easiest time to use it. We'll go ahead and discard our fruits. We'll play our Arctic, and then we're going to hope that it's enough to kind of time walk my opponent. They did show me blue Captain's Call though, so there is a chance that they maybe have another one in hand. If they do have another one in hand, they get to play around this Frostbite. If they don't though, they're just going to be passing back, and we're going to have Red Thunderquake. And if we do end up time walking them with the Red Thunderquake, we just totally win the game. They end up having to pitch 2 whole cards to play that Sizzle, so we're in a good spot. And then they're going to play Static Shock. The on hit is active, but we're not really concerned about it. We're just going to go ahead and I guess just block for 7 like this, including the Buckler. And then we'll get to go ahead and send the Thunderquake for 10. That probably should wrap up the game because my opponent is just going to be on the back foot. And then eventually we're going to draw like a game closer like Macho or the blue Glacials. Where it's also really good too is my opponent's deck has a bunch of 2 blocks. So like they have to block with their full hand and they still end up taking 1 damage here. We're just going to do the same thing. We can just keep on sending these until basically the game is over. It's just really good card economy. Like we're trading 1 card for probably like 4 cards again for my opponent. Like eventually they just fatigue out here. Like they only have 11 cards left in deck, and we still have what 22 plus the Arctic. We still have armor up. Like if we're just not sending the Titan's Fist here, my opponent never gets to cash in these Blade Beckoners. So like they just have no way to get back in the game. So overall, I feel like it's probably just over for my opponent. We'll go ahead and see what they can do. We also have blue Macho in hand, so there's just probably no way. We're just going to pop the Blossom and then just play it off the 2 blues. So we'll go ahead and block 3, and then this should be the game. This is why this deck can be very powerful, right? Is because you can disrupt these aggro decks very cleanly, and then you don't have a problem closing out the end game because all of your blues are so strong that every single turn, like you're just ripping everything from your opponent. Like even if we sent 10 there, like with a Red Thunderquake, my opponent literally can't live because they just have a bunch of 2 blocks and they have this no block here. And at that point, they block out. And then eventually in like 2 turns, they just completely fatigue out of the game, which is definitely very strong. So it's why I think that like Oldhim is probably the better Guardian to play, and Ice Hero in general. You just have really good blocking potential. You can start the game with that Buckler, and you still remove a card every single turn with the Ice React if you want to, but then you just have this incredible like game closing ability. The Terra deck is actually pretty different, surprisingly. I thought they would relatively be the same, but Terra's ability, where if you have an Earth card and pitch at the end of your turn, so both on your turn and your opponent's turn, and you pay 1, you make a Might token. So this means that we want to play a lot more Earth blues, and then we want to have cards that curve out so that we can pitch and still pay for that hero text. And then we also want cards that we play during our opponent's turn. So when we run through everything, some of the stuff is the same, but things that are a little bit different with cards like Concuss, where if this hits a hero, if it has attack greater than its base, they discard a card. So if it just has a Might token and it comes in for 7, on hit, they discard. So you want to play a card like this because it synergizes with its Might tokens. Same goes for Thump, where if its attack is any greater than its base, so 1 Might will do it, it has Dominate, and when it hits, they discard a card. So very similar text here. We're playing some Earth Fusion cards since we have so many Earth cards. We have a card like Entangle, where if it's fused, their first attack it's -2, so it's like basically a 3 for 9. Also playing a lot more Earth cards means we're going to play a card like Redwood Hammer, where when an Earth card is pitched, it gets +1, so it's basically Titan's Fist, but because we have so many of these cheaper Earth cards, so cards like Flourish and Canopy Shelter, I just wanted to include this hammer because I think it'll probably come in for 4 a little bit more often. And we're running Blossom of Spring because we have some 3 costs here. So what you could do is you could pop Blossom of Spring, send your Boulder Drop, Cartilage Crush, Concuss, etc. And then with the resource that's left floating off of the Blossom, because you're going to pitch your blue Earth to play your 3 costs at the end of the turn, you can pay with that resource for Terra. And then when we go down into the inventory, we have a card like Turn Timber, which I think is pretty important. So I think you also could play copies of Staunch if you want. So you could do 2 red Staunch and 2 Turn Timber. And these are important because they curve out at 2, which means that you will naturally have a resource left over. So if you play these during your opponent's turn, pitching an Earth card, you will get to pay that resource at the end of the turn and then go into your turn with the Might. So if you sequence everything kind of properly, you can end up making 2 Mights like between your turn and your opponent's turn. Very good stuff. You can also play cards like Sledge if you want to play in the mirror. You can just pitch 2 Earth cards or 2 blues, and then just one of them is Earth, and you can activate Terra at the end of the turn. So overall, this deck actually plays a little bit differently. You kind of want to be proactively putting cards in your pitch a lot more often. That way you're able to be activating Terra every single turn. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and jump into our example game. Into Terra, we're going to take a second to get some tempo. What's kind of cool though is that we can include both Chokeslam and Crush the Week. Normally I sometimes don't show my sideboarding enough, but I think this is actually a pretty interesting use case of where these can end up being pretty powerful plays. I'll leave the disables in since we're going second. And while Turn Timber is really good into tall Guardian decks, I'm kind of leaning towards playing this a little bit more proactively. I think if anything, maybe we could end up cutting the fault lines for the 2 copies of Turn though, if we really wanted to. So we'll go ahead and try this configuration. Cool thing here is that we actually have edge of their seats, so we can play this during their first turn. So if my opponent just taps out to set up a bunch of my tokens and stuff, we can at least pitch for the edge of their seats. So they end up sending the fist here. We're just going to go and block for 3. I wonder if they're just trying to clear out some blues, but we'll go ahead and play the edge of their seats. I could pay the 1 here at the end of the turn with Terra, but I kind of don't want to lose the boulder drop. I think the boulder drop is pretty important here, so kind of going back and forth. I'm going to opt to not do this just on the chance that if I were to draw like 4 blues, I might just accidentally lose the game. I want to actually have something that presents damage. The irony is that we draw a pretty much unplayable hand. We're gonna have to use Blossom off the rip. The main question is, what do we want to use here? I guess we'll probably end up only keeping the Cartilage Crush. I feel like I'm not going to be able to keep enough cards to keep 2 blues to send these disables, and it doesn't always guarantee that my opponent is even going to have an arsenal. Looks like my opponent is just using their fridge here. Get away taking 2. I guess it turns off cards like Mocking Blow, which is also pretty good for when you're going second in this matchup. And then with the floating, they play Tension in the Air. So we're going to get another turn to try to disrupt them. The main problem is once all of this goes off, I'm pretty sure we're just dead. But we have Turn Timber, but ironically, we have no Hearth card to fuse it with, so it's actually not that great. Next turn is going to be the huge turn, so I think what we're going to do here is we are going to go ahead and block for 7 to stop the on hits, and then we're going to play the Cartilage Crush, hope it disrupts, and then we're going to arsenal the Turn Timber, and then probably have to block like 20 damage or whatever. My opponent says no initial blocks in this. We'll see if they're just planning on taking everything and then just keeping the extra card to be able just to pitch. Looks like they're going to play Oasis. I guess that makes a lot of sense. They can also activate Lyeth, and it looks like they're using the floating to play another Tension in the Air. Although they don't have anything else, I mean, that is a lot of damage they leak, although their turn they're getting plus, I think it's plus 12. So it's all kind of insane. We're going to go into Arsenal Timber. We don't draw a pitch card with this. We don't draw a pitch card, and we don't draw an Earth card. So I think we're just going to block for 12 and just hope for the best next turn. All right. So they play this. They intimidate one of our reds, which we can't play, which is pretty unfortunate. We're going to end up taking 7 here. I guess it's not as bad as I thought what it was going to end up being, so I might as well put the Buckler in front now just to guarantee that we get the second block later on. Our turn, unfortunately, this is going to be passing back with a Thump in hand, so if it was a blue, we could have done something. Now we start drawing all of our blues, which at least means we get to play the Turn Timber. So my opponent plays a bunch of buffs, plays a Mocking Blow. I'm kind of thinking we just block this highest number possible since they have a bunch of buffs cracking this turn. We'll go ahead and show Fruits. It'd be really nice if we didn't have to use our chess piece on turn 2. If we still had our chess piece, we could actually block with a whole other card. We actually could have blocked with a Canopy Shelter, which would have been a pretty big deal, being able to get like an extra 3 value on this cycle. But unfortunately, we were just kind of stuck having to pitch 2 whole cards to do this. We're going to go ahead and pay the Might, the 1 floating, and then we'll go ahead and send the Thump for 7. Our opponent can only block for 3 here. We'll see if they have something like Oasis or another D-React, although I believe I saw them pitch an Oasis early on and they played one, so I think that this is going to connect. It does end up connecting. My opponent's going to lose a card. We could actually get back in this pretty cleanly. My opponent doesn't have any big auras popping, so I think that with our armor still being up, we're not in a bad spot. We're going to go ahead and pay the Might at the end of the turn, so at least we get to kind of convert having the 2 blues. We draw another Thump. It's really good. So I think what we're going to do here is, unless my opponent presents a ton of damage, we're just going to go ahead and send another Thump and then arsenal the Turn Timber. They're going to play Power Play, but it's not lethal. So I'm thinking that we just go ahead and take the damage. We end up going to 1, which is a little scary, but we're doing the exact same play again next turn, and then we're holding the Turn Timber. So any tall attack they send doesn't actually really threaten us a whole lot because we're basically going to be sitting on 8 defense from Arsenal. The other cool part too is that if we play the Turn Timber during our opponent's turn, we can also pay with the 1 floating. And so we'll end up with 2 Mights into our next turn, which can be pretty relevant if we have something like Redwood Hammer. So we could end up sending Hammer for 6 with 1 card. My opponent's got to discard a card. We're going to go into our next turn with a Might token. I guess I should stick the Gauntlets in front. There's a chance I could play a card like Concealed Blade, in which case I would just lose by this going 1 over. My opponent is not going to react on it. It's interesting. I wonder if their hand just didn't convert. They did have the Mocking Blow, so I'm a little surprised that they took this line. We have the Thump, so the Thump is going to come and dominate again. If my opponent doesn't have any sort of prevention, this is going to connect. It's going to block for 2. They're probably going to have to pitch Goliath here. That is kind of a cool thing that we actually kind of deny with Dominate, getting to get extra blocking value of the Goliath, because this will only apply the buff to 1 card on the chain. If we had sent something like Disable for 8, they could have blocked with like 3 cards, activated this, and then gotten, like 3 extra block basically out of the hero text. I'm still not sure what the right play was. I still think I like my line of sending the Thump while we just have the Might token up. They're going to get a hand though, and we have to think about what we want to do. They're sending the Titan's Fist again. I still don't really exactly know what the play line here is, but the only thing is that the Macho Grande is lethal. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and stick 5 in front of this. We should have the game on lock here with the Macho Grande. If there is a way around this, I'm going to get blown out, but outside of the Oasis, I think they pitched really early on, and I don't think we're in the second cycle yet. This hopefully should be the game. I guess I do draw 5 cards a turn, so I guess I did forget that they probably have higher deck velocity than we do, so there actually is a chance that they did circle back to the Oasis. All right, okay, no, they have no way to get out of this. Okay, definitely an interesting game. I'm actually pretty surprised that we came back, considering my opponent got to stick a bunch of auras really quickly on the table, but I guess just, turning all your cards sideways definitely works, because like you can just block 12